Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Taking the Lead. I'm your host, Ken Jacobs of Jacobs Consulting and Executive Coaching. And if this is your first time, welcome. If you're back, we're delighted. If it's your second time or more, you know that Taking the Lead is where I get the joy of interviewing leaders from the PR field who I've come to respect and admire not because of what they do in PR or social or digital or any of those things, because I respect them as a leader. But as you know, sometimes I get to interview someone not only that I know, but who's a friend. And that's who our guest is today. So in a second, I'm going to introduce you to Kristelle Siarza. Kristelle Siarza. She is a business executive, nonprofit founder, and entrepreneur with more than a decade of experience in digital communications and leadership. She founded Siarza Social Digital. Now it's just Siarza, so we're going for simplicity. It is a 360-degree digital marketing firm, and they pivot on innovation, curation, and creativity. How's that for some solid branding? They've grown to more than 20 team members who work across the globe for the agency. She's an Albuquerque first, 2016 40 under 40, 2019 Woman of Influence, and an instructor at two universities. And lastly, she is a proud Filipina. She founded the Asian Business Collaborative to support Asian business owners, which is often an underserved group in the business community. And we're just going to toss it to my dear friend, Kristelle Siarza Moon. Kristelle, I can't pronounce this name of this dear friend, but I want to use your full name, Kristelle Siarza Moon. Welcome to Taking the Lead before I mess it up further.
Jen, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's very serendipitous considering that you were on my old podcast, Stories, Success, and Stuff. And while it might be taking a break, I'm just so grateful for the time with you. And thank you for sharing your story and letting me share mine.
It was such fun. I hope it comes back. And I
Yay.
hope you take second time guests. All right. People want to know your thinking. So we're going to start. Three executives, whether in PR, outside of PR, doesn't matter, who you admire for being truly effective leaders who have engaged and inspired followers and whom you might follow.
Yes, great question. Number one, I've liked to model myself and some of the other companies that I hope to build after Richard Branson. I
Oh,
Richard Branson seems like a very odd picking for a Filipina like myself, but I really admire his ambition, his dream of life, his motivation of marketing and being so well branded. While he knows he's made mistakes and he knows when he's been successful and non-successful, I feel like Richard definitely hits the mark when it comes to creating companies and experiences for the benefit of the people around him and living life to the fullest. So definitely one executive that I put at the top of my list. I really love Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban is just such a fascinating individual who really does things unapologetically. I think that's his lesson that he goes with. He might not be perfect either, but I think as an effective leader, I think that he is a pretty standout professional. And I would say another executive, she passed away, and she's very near and dear to my heart, but she's not a well-known executive. But to me, she always was, and that was my mentor, Dr. Deli Alcantara. She created the New Mexico Asian Family Center in the early 2000s once she identified a problem that needed to be solved in our community. She was an instructor at UNM, and she just lived her best life. And so she was one of the first two women I told, the other woman being my mom, when I was starting Ciarza, and she said, people will leave you alone. Just go, do your thing, and go, and you'll be great. And I hope to be that person for a lot more people. I hope that in the time that I've been in business now for 10 years, I hoped to be that person to really shine that light of positivity, that encouragement for others that want to do what we do in the PR and digital marketing field. But I know that her positivity and her encouragement were one of a kind. And as somebody said about her once, they don't make people like her anymore.
Yeah.
I still try really hard to emulate that.
Three great examples. I mean, when people are no longer with us physically, their leadership legacy can go on and on and on. The PR industry recently lost Barbara Hunter at the age of 97, one of my first bosses, and just an incredibly brave leader. Um, I took Virgin Airways from Vegas once. It was total party. So he's living his brand. All right. You know, leadership is about accountability. It's about a lot of things, but one of them is accountability. How do you hold yourself accountable to be the best leader you can be for all your followers, stakeholders, clients, 5 days a week?
I hold myself accountable by making sure that I check my ego. I have, if there was one thing, I'm constantly making sure that I ask people to just give me an honest pulse check on. It's making sure that I'm not above one other person, or everybody should be treating me the way that I should be treated, which is at the top. Like, I hold myself accountable to that, because that is not, in my opinion, that is not an effective leader. When a person is leading selfishly, I think leaders should be holding themselves selflessly. So I always ask myself, do, are my actions worth that? Is it worth it to be an asshole, Kristelle? Is it worth it to be is it worth it to be, how did you make this person feel? Do you have to apologize? Do you have to tell people that you love them when you really are also angry at them, right? I keep myself accountable by really just asking people to check in my ego. Like, I left to San Diego. Here's an example. I left to San Diego last week on this incredible adventure. And it was an adventure related to a client that we had. And I got to touch base with a friend of mine that I've known now for since, gosh, 7, 8 years now. And I just asked him, I said, can you just promise me one thing? Can you just check my ego for me? And he goes, absolutely. And you've never had a problem with that. But I know that he's a person that I can count on to tell me that you might need to hold yourself accountable for certain things. So
It's interesting, we've known each other 4 years or 5 years, something,
2022. Yeah, 2022 was my first
right?
Academy event.
Oh, so 3 years. Okay, I thought longer ago,
It
but
feels like longer.
no. Okay, I'm gonna offline have to check those dates. But oh no, you may be right, 'cause it was post-COVID. Okay, anyway, the main thing is stay focused, Ken. When I think, well, when I think of people from Counselors Academy on a scale of who's got lots of ego, no names, and who's not driven by ego, who doesn't need to be checked, you don't need to be checked. So I'm in agreement with your friend. All right. You have been courageously public about the fact that you beat a very serious gambling addiction a few years ago. How did you have the courage to do that? And what leadership skills did you tap, or what did you learn about leadership from that experience?
Well, thank you for bringing that up. I know that a lot of people dance around the topic of their vices. And for me in particular, I was very public about it because it was humiliating. It was a growth experience. It was a humbling moment. And it is a notch of perseverance that I needed to keep myself humble with. And the main reason why I'm public about it is because I see some really amazing leaders, whether they're friends of mine that created a company that is being evaluated for $20 million. I see friends of mine that are just so ambitious with their lives, but they just can't get a break. They can't get that one big break or that one big client to be profitable. And then I see friends of mine that are they're just doing so well from each other, but they just don't realize what pitfall they're running away from. And so I'm public about it because there was a leader in my life that told me he had a gambling addiction. And the way that the story goes is he's very well known in the New Mexico community, and he said I would never go back to Vegas ever again in my life. And a couple of friends of mine and I had said, oh, we'll take you to Vegas with us, and no, 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 no. And then he goes, no, no, no. He told me this brutal story about how he had to go to rehab and he had to talk to people about how he had to face his family, he had to face his fears, and how he would have these long trips and like not come home because he would just be on a roll. And it would just really, really ruined his life. And there was something very, very significant about that moment when he told me that, because while I never really felt down that pitfall, I just never knew how to answer back to the depression that was holding me back. And or how like I really wanted to progress forward in my career, but financially I just couldn't. And that was it. It was just the gambling addiction, was just it. And then all of a sudden, the humiliating part came where New Mexico's taxation and revenue was just like, you have a problem with your taxes, and I'm telling all of your clients and your staff. I had no choice. It was just outed. And
Oh
because
my
it was
word.
so ugly, I knew that there were other business owners that were going through the horrifying, embarrassing stories of taxation and revenue pounding down their throat, and then compounded by the gambling addiction. I just had to tell my team in tears, like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this had happened. I hope that you can, if you decide to walk away, I very much understand from this company. I said, but at the end of the day, this is a really difficult thing and I'm going to get through it. And, I'm proud to say 6 years later, September 1st, 2019 was my last bet. And I want, I guess the reason why I talk about this so courageously is it's not courageous. It sucks. It sucks every day. I tell myself, I'm not going to gamble today. And I hope that some other person that might be going through gambling addiction, might be going through a drug addiction, might be going through an alcohol addiction, I hope that they can just know that there's somebody else out there in the world that chose not to do this particular advice today because it'll help them down the road. So that's my
That
leadership experience out of it.
I think that is great and courageous. And, if even one person hears your story and says, I'm going to change, I'm going to get help, that's just this huge gift you've just given them. And you've given when you've spoken about it before. So thank you for your courage. We've talked about, leadership is about courage to do it effectively. So thank you for yours. Speaking of challenges, what was your toughest leadership moment, if it wasn't other than what you just mentioned? And how did you get through it? We always say honest answers only, please.
Yeah. My toughest leadership moment was actually before one of the toughest leadership moments that I ever had was actually laying off people and my first and also like terminating my first employee. They say the hardest person to fire is your first. So I would say that those became the reason why that was such a tough time was because financial struggles aside, it was one of those things where I had to learn you can't be everybody's favorite person and you can't take care of everybody. And that was a rude awakening in so many levels. And that's when I also knew that the joke when they said that business owners are kind of like sociopaths, that's when I really learned what that
I
meant.
never heard that one.
Oh, all my life. Like successful owners are like sociopaths, and that's scary to think about. And people will never really understand what that means until you are an owner. But letting go of somebody or, letting go of somebody for their own good, not for your good, is a very hard leadership lesson to have. And it's depressing and it sucks. And you don't want any other leader to go through that. But once you get through those tough leadership moments or make those tough leadership calls, at the end of the day, you think about what were the pros and the cons and what outweighed each other. And that's what I think about whenever I think about my toughest leadership moment.
So, just for the record, you didn't kill anyone. You just fired them, right? I just
Yeah,
wanted
yeah, yeah.
to
Just love
people, I don't want your office worried about you. Okay, good. So, 2023, Ciarza becomes one of the newest members of the Change Agencies, which was founded by two friends of ours, the first and only national network of independently owned PR firms focused on inclusive and authentic communications to multicultural and LGBTQ plus communities. what is your feeling now that government, higher ed, private sector are not just eliminating programs, but seem to be going after those programs? What's your advice to organizations out there who want to support DE&I despite what's going on?
I think that when you turn your backs on equity and inclusion programs, you're making a huge, huge mistake. There's a lot of ROI that comes from investing into communities of color and communities with people from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic statuses, different ways of living. Who they love and how they look shouldn't matter to how you hire them. At the end of the day, you just want to create equal opportunities. That's what we were fundamentally founded on as a country. And so it makes me really, really pissed that people are looking at the wrong reasons of equity and inclusion, and diverse. And somebody said it best, if your company has to seriously consider getting rid of it, your culture never had it to begin with. It was
Mm,
just the box checking that we all talk about. And for the companies that really ingrained themselves into equity and inclusion programming and causes and really understand it and that are not making cuts, they've already seen the ROI. They've already seen the improvements it's made upon their culture. They've already seen how essential it is. And for me at Ciarza, we've had diversity in our core values since 2014 when we were founded. So it never was a question that diversity was part of it. We never had to fake it. We never had to pretend to implement it. And we didn't have to blow up the company and invest a lot of resources into it. We just were understanding and more appreciative of each other. So I think that when communities talk about how the private sector is eliminating these programs, nuh-uh. Let's start highlighting the ones that are keeping them, and let's also start recognizing the fact that they're here to stay. The communities will start to gravitate where they need to gravitate to. So that's how people of color are. We're never meant to be pitted against each other. That's a very wrong way to look at it. And I think that people that get rid of those programs are dumb. They're so dumb. So,
yeah.
so, so dumb.
We don't need to name the companies that are backing away, but I think we can give a little shout out to Costco, Delta Airlines, Apple, and Chase Bank, who have at this point stood by their programs. And I saw something very simple like don't don't shop where you can't be hired, right? Don't shop where you wouldn't be supported. So it just makes sense.
Yeah.
Last question. When did you know you had truly made the leap from manager or even agency owner to true leader? Because let's be honest, there are agency owners who aren't yet fully developed as leaders. No one we know, of course. And there are people without the title of agency owner or CEO or president who are highly effective leaders. So when did you know, yeah, there's a shift? I've made a shift.
It was this is a great question, and I felt the shift after I got married. So I've
Interesting.
been I got married. My husband and I met in 2015. The company was barely a year old. As Danielle Lucero, which you've had under your purview, and grateful for your leadership energy training. She came about 2 months after I met Spencer. So she says that
Uh,
Spencer has two months on me. Okay, Danielle.
but
So
she's your work spouse. She's your work wife. So you might spend more time with Danielle than with Spencer, right?
100%.
Yeah.
So the reason why I felt that, or so the reason why I felt that moment of like, oh, I'm a leader, no longer an owner, or I'm a leader and an owner, no longer a manager, was when I left for my wedding. So I took a 2 week break. I did not know what to expect in the 2 week break. I didn't know how to treat the 2 week break. And I wasn't nervous. I didn't want to come back. I wanted to have a longer vacation. But it was nice like waking up at 10 o'clock in the morning going, what am I doing today? Absolutely nothing. Great. That's not the
Good.
leadership That's not the leadership lesson. It was afterwards where I said, oh, my company can really run on its own. The company is perfectly fine without me. And a lot of processes and protocols and trainings and procedures that we put into place have really been executed, not perfectly, but the vision of an operational agency that's more profitable than its competitors to me was a big win. And that's when I knew I was leading, no longer managing.
That
I
is.
struggle,
Mhm.
but it is.
All leaders do, I think.
Mhm. And every leader also struggles where they're like, well, where's my place now that I'm leading? What's my place? Where am I in my agency? And I would be lying if I said that never crossed my mind. But that's not to say that the company has grown without me. It has to a certain extent, as Danielle has said before, like they need me, which is great. But I get really excited when I start to see other agency leaders within my organization really leading. So I'm grateful for that. And that's kind of when I knew when I came back, I said, yep, it's in great place. It's in a great place without me. So
What a great feeling. It reminds me, I interviewed years and years ago Rob Flaherty, the former CEO of Ketchum, for an article about leading leaders. And he said something to the effect of, don't worry about are you needed? You're needed. The difference is you go from being the player to being the player coach, or the coach manager. And so then your skills are less about baseball, and hitting the home run, but more about coaching others so they can make their own home runs. And I don't know anything about sports, but I do understand his analogy. You shift from PR, social, digital expertise, which you'll always have, but now you're spending your time helping others become magnificent leaders and successful in their own right. And I would propose that is far more fulfilling. I mean, PR is great, digital is great, social is great. It's all great. I'm not going to knock it. I was in the business many years. To me, and I'm guessing for you, it still doesn't come close to that moment of saying, look what Danielle did when I was gone. Look at what my other leaders did when I was gone. I'm a damn good leader. And now I can look to the future of my agency. I can look at what comes after, what comes next. And if you're too mired in the details, I don't think you can do that. And that's your real gift, preparing your organization and your people for the future.
yeah, yeah.
So
And
salute to you. If people want to get in touch with the delightful Kristelle Siarza Moon, APR, where do they find you?
They can find me on ciarza.com. We have a full profile of the entire team, if in case you're curious about who the other great leaders are. Or you can find me at misskrystal.com. I'm always on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. So I would love to hear from you all. And Ken, thank you so much for your kindness and for your generosity of time and your persistence. It's really critical for individuals. So thank you so much for everything that you do
Well,
for our community.
thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your energy and your fun. And as you all know, if you want to get in touch with me, if you want to discuss leadership coaching, agency consulting, if you're not sure if you might need consulting or coaching, hit me up, KEN at JACOBSCOMM.com. We're happy to offer you a complimentary session, as I always say. You may be surprised at what we can achieve in 45 minutes. And as we also say, till next time, keep on taking the lead.